They told you France was elegance, culture, refinement, a beacon of art and philosophy. But they never told you how carefully that image was constructed, how many layers were polished and repolished until the cracks disappeared from view. They showed you Paris, the lights, the cafes, the quiet confidence of a nation that seems to have everything figured out. But they did not show you the machinery behind the curtain, the compromises, the contradictions, the parts that do not fit the story. You walk through the streets and everything feels intentional, every building preserved, every corner curated, as if history itself has been edited, selected, framed. What is remembered is just as important as what is forgotten. Entire chapters reduced to footnotes, uncomfortable truths softened into academic language, conflicts turned into abstract discussions instead of lived realities. The past becomes aesthetic, something to admire, not something to question. There's a narrative about liberty, equality, fraternity, repeated so often it begins to sound like fact rather than aspiration. But ideals are easy to declare and much harder to maintain. Behind the slogans, there are tensions that never fully disappeared, divisions that shift shape but never quite dissolve. The promise remains, but the reality bends around it. You start to notice how influence works, quietly, without announcement. Cultural dominance presented as universal taste, language elevated to a standard, norms exported subtly through admiration rather than force. People adopt it willingly, believing it to be neutral, unaware of how it shapes their perspective. Power does not always look like control. Sometimes it looks like admiration. And then there is the silence around certain histories, the parts that do not align with the image. Stories of expansion, of control beyond borders, of decisions made far from the streets where their consequences were felt. These are acknowledged, but often at a distance, framed in ways that soften their edges, turning them into something that can be discussed without discomfort. Even in the present, there is a balance between appearance and reality. Systems that seem stable from the outside carry pressures within. Debates that appear intellectual are deeply personal for those involved. Progress exists, but so do setbacks, often happening at the same time, creating a tension that is hard to resolve. What makes it difficult to see is how convincing the surface is. The beauty is real, the culture is real, the contributions are undeniable. That is what allows the rest to remain unnoticed. When something is admired, it is rarely questioned with the same intensity. The narrative protects itself. So the question is not whether France is what it claims to be, but how much of that claim is maintained through careful storytelling, through emphasis and omission, through the natural human tendency to prefer a coherent story over a complicated truth. And once you start to see that, it becomes harder to look at the image the same way again, because you realize it was never just an image. It was a construction, refined over time, designed to be believed. And once you begin to question that construction, you notice how deeply it is embedded not only in how others see France, but in how France sees itself. Identity becomes something defended, reinforced through education, media, and repetition. Generations grow up inheriting not just history, but a version of history that feels settled, resolved, even when it is not. Doubt is allowed, but only within certain boundaries. And stepping outside those boundaries often feels like betrayal rather than inquiry. There is also the question of who gets to define the narrative. Not every voice carries the same weight. Not every experience is given the same legitimacy. Some perspectives are elevated as representative, while others remain marginal, dismissed as exceptions or outliers. This imbalance shapes the overall picture, creating a sense of unity that may not fully exist. The louder the dominant narrative becomes, the easier it is for alternative realities to fade into the background. Economic and social